What is up, everyone? As some of you may already know, there is a new PS5 that was announced this morning, and that is this newly dubbed PS5 Slim. And the main differences here between the current version of the PS5 and this new version, apart from the overall size and weight, is the actual optical drive. So the optical drive on this new version can be user replaced, and it is sort of interchangeable. There's a few reasons for this. I think the main reason here is actually for Sony's end, and that is to cut costs. So originally, if you don't know anything about the PS5, the PS5 came out in two versions. It came out in the digital edition and the disc edition. So originally, if you bought the digital edition, you were stuck with that platform for the entirety of the time that you own the console. If you wanted to play discs, you had to go out and buy a whole new console and have the disk drive and everything. The issue here with Sony was they had to have two different SKUs for their product. They had to have stock of both the disc version and the diskless version. Now, all they have to do is they can just keep stock of the base digital version, and then when they package them, they just have to either include the optical drive or don't include the optical drive. Now, I'm predicting there's going to be a few different issues with this. It mostly stems around this optical drive. So with this new optical drive, it is designed to be user replaceable, and that actually poses a few small issues. The main one is being with how this drive is actually built. Now, currently on the PS5, the optical drive is internal to the console, meaning that all the chips and everything for it are in the drive, and the drive is screwed in. You have to pull the whole thing apart. It's not user serviceable. Now, for Sony to implement a user replaceable drive, a few things have to change. So if you don't know anything about the way the optical drives work on the PS5 and the PS4 and the PS3, is they utilize a handshake procedure. So the drive itself has its own little private key, and that's given to the console. It says, hey, I'm an authorized drive. The discs that I'm reading are working fine and they're allowed to work on the system. This was implemented to combat piracy, because on the PlayStation 1 and the PlayStation 2, optical based piracy was huge. Like, it almost ruined it in a way if it wasn't for Sony's sort of dominance in the industry. Since the PS3, they implemented this handshake procedure where the drive has its own private key, and that's given to the console, like I mentioned before. Now, the issue lies in how that key is stored and how it's provided to the actual system itself. What Sony did is they jumped across to another company to produce this chip for them, and that's Renesas here.
What I tell people is we are the world's largest MCU maker that you've never heard of.
So on the PS4, it's actually a huge issue on the PS4 at the moment. PS5 is still a bit new for this to sort of be as prevalent. This chip is paired to the console from the factory. It's not user replaceable, so when it dies, the optical drive dies with it, and the system is essentially a brick. I believe on the PS4, even if this chip isn't working, you can't even update the system. It actually hangs because there's firmware updates for this drive as well, or this chip as well. What I'm getting at here is because this chip is paired to the drive, this chip now has to go back inside the console. Originally, it was actually part of the daughter board for the system. On the original PS4, the big fat one, this chip was part of this daughter board, and on the PS5, it's also part of the daughter board. There's two versions of the PS5 drive. They're just slightly different. On the PS4 Slim, Sony has done this similar thing before with the Slim, where they've taken all these intricate components and the paired components of the drive and they've put it onto the board. This reduces manufacturing costs. There's another issue here. Like what they have with the PS4, there's another chip on this drive that's actually a high failure part, and that is the motor controller for the drive. Now, if you imagine the way the disk drive works, has a motor that spins the disk around, there's another motor that moves the optical pickup forwards and backwards. They're constantly in use, and these chips get quite hot. On the original PS5, this chip isn't even cooled at all. There's spaces for it to have a thermal pad to cool down using the sheet metal on the actual drive, but all the drives I've pulled apart, I've never seen any thermal pad on this, and that chip actually dies quite often, especially on the PS5 from what I've noticed. I mean, you may be wondering, why does this matter? Like, why does all this matter about this new removable drive? It's great for consumers, right? Well, the issue I'm predicting here is they're also going to move this chip back inside the console like they did with the PS4 Slim. This is a high failure part, meaning that when this does fail, you can't just go out and buy a new disk drive and plug it in. You can't just fix it yourself. You're stuck in the same situation you had before where you've got this paperweight of a system. You can only use digital games now. The only benefit of replacing this optical drive at the moment, from what I can understand, is if the actual optical pickup, the laser, fails. That's the only benefit you've got here. And I don't think this drive is going to be very cheap. I think it's going to be around about $85 US, maybe more. I'm not sure. I haven't actually looked, but it's going to be not a cheap fix. Now, the reason why I say these two chips are going to be put inside the console, the main one being the Renesas chip is paired to the console. They can't just leave it in the drive. They'd have to re-implement the drive handshake procedure between the system and the drive, and you'd have to have software updates and stuff for it to work, and that's just not a good user experience. So they're definitely going to put that chip inside the console, locked away, and the actual optical drive is going to be like the Slim, where it is a fully mechanical drive. There's no ICs or anything in there. And the reason why I say this is because this is user replaceable, the connectors that it uses have to be sturdy. They have to be strong. They can't use something fine like this sort of connector here. It's just going to get mangled by Malcolm Gorilla Hands or whoever owns the console. They're going to mash it in there and break it. The same reason why they use such chunky connectors on their PSVR headset. And the downside of that is they can't fit as many pins. They don't have as many conductors. So they're going to have to move pretty much everything from the original drive inside the console, and some parts that fail often, like motor controller, are just going to fail anyway, and you're going to be stuck the same way as the original PS5. A few other people have mentioned online, but like, oh, that'd be cool if they could do this to the original PS5. And there's actually a few different issues with that. This is just a side topic. A few people have asked, why can't you just put the optical drive back into the original PS5? I'll just bring one up here. Okay, so this is a bit of a side topic to the original one, and I've just seen a few people mention this or ask this question online, and that is, why can't you upgrade the original digital version of the PS5 to the disc version? And there's a few issues in this. The number one is the Renesas IC. And like we mentioned before, that's paired to the system. There's no keys on the digital version for this drive. Another thing is there's no actual physical hardware for it. This optical drive connector here, both the data connector and the power connector for it aren't populated. Another thing is on the PS5, it has a small amount of flash memory, and this memory is kind of like the EEPROM on the original Xbox. It holds things like console, different serial numbers, things like that. It also holds the strapping, so the sort of bits that tell the software update and the console itself what version of console it is, and they're different between the digital version and the non-digital version. And the main issue is because the actual drive keys aren't stored anywhere that's accessible at the moment. They're all stored in a secure environment, so you can't copy them from one console to the other. Maybe one day when the console's completely jailbroken and there's no sort of limits in that regard, then yeah, you could probably definitely upgrade it. But at the moment, you can't upgrade it. And you can't take the new optical drive out of the new PS5 Slim and install it into the old one. So if you're going to be asking that question, it just won't work. It's impossible. So yeah, there's sort of my sort of small predictions of what's going to be issues with this drive. If you have any ideas or thoughts about this, just leave a comment down below. If you think this is a good thing for consumers, or if it's a bad thing, or if you think it's not going to make much of a huge difference because most people are already invested in the digital version, they already have all their digital games, they're not going to want to buy physical games anymore. Anyway, I personally think it's a cool idea that you can upgrade the drive later. It means you can save some money, but yeah, leave your comments down below. And until next time, see ya.